Welcome to the Out and About Live Advice Centre for the first talk of the day, where Peter Vaughan is going to be giving you advice on buying a motorhome or a campervan. There will be a Q&A at the end if you have any questions. But for now, over to you, Peter.
Good morning, and you do seem to have a very sort of private talk today. Yes, yesterday was packed. The day before, I think people were just escaping from the rain rather than coming to listen to me.
That might be my fault, though, Peter.
Sorry?
That might be my fault.
I think
you might notice in the show guide it's got the wrong time. It says 10:30, so there might be a few people coming at 10:30.
Yeah, so they'll only get half the talk. But I've been. Oh, there's my clicker. I've been writing about motorhomes for a very, very long time. Back in the days when they didn't even have power steering. And I'm going to give you a sort of overview of my thoughts on how to choose the right van. If you've got any questions at the end, however specific or whatever they are, just fire them at me and I'll try and answer them. So the first thing is to think about how you're actually going to use the vehicle. First of all, is it going to replace a car? In our family, a Volkswagen Golf was replaced by a Campervan, and this is our latest purchase. In terms of why, because the size is similar to a large estate car or an SUV, and it'll go under height barrier, so it's very, very usable as an everyday vehicle. If you haven't got to replace a car with your van, then the next thing to consider size-wise perhaps is space at home. Yes, you can store your motorhome off-site. You can use one of the secure site storage facilities that are available for caravans and motorhomes. Casoa is the sort of body that manages those, and if your insurance company will probably want one that's Casoa approved. But do think, if you're thinking of going down that route, do think about the practicalities of it, because not having your van at home obviously isn't as convenient for that sort of spur-of-the-moment getaway. Also remember that if you're keeping your van in a storage facility, you take it home, pack it for overnight for the trip the next day. Insurance companies generally don't like that. They like the vehicle to be either in the storage facility or away being used. They don't like it being on the road outside your house for the trip the next day. And then when you actually go away, how are you going to use your van? Will you stay on full facility campsites, in which case things like the shower and toilet facilities are rather less important. But if you're going to stay on farm sites, be on rally fields like here, maybe do some off-grid camping in the wilds of Scotland or somewhere, then those facilities become much more important, as do things like water tank capacity, having upgraded solar panels, upgraded leisure batteries, and all that sort of thing to improve your off-grid capability. In terms of the number of berths and travel seats, well, that might seem obvious, but a lot of motorhomes and campervans have different numbers of travel seats to berths, and if you're new to the market, that might seem odd. Well, if you've got more berths than travel seats, the sort of explanation behind that is that you might want a bed each. You might have a double bed at one end, double bed at the other, and if you're perhaps a larger person, you might take advantage of that. But more commonly, those extra berths get used by visiting friends or grandchildren that might come for the day in a car, stay overnight, but they're not actually travelling in the motorhome. More common, perhaps, is to have more travel seats than berths, and there again, it does add a bit of extra versatility. Maybe you're on site with friends that have also got a motorhome, and you decide, all of you, to go out for the day together to visit somewhere. Well, then you don't have to take two vehicles if you've got more travel seats in one of the vehicles to take everybody. When you're away, will you cook in the van all the time, or will you barbecue outside? Will you go to the pub? Think about that, because again, there's no point in having facilities in the van that you're not going to use. It's all very well having a microwave and a full oven, but all that is it's adding weight to the vehicle, it's taking up storage space if you're not really going to use them. And if you've got a microwave, then that generally is only usable when you're hooked up on a campsite. So if you're en route to a site, you just want a quick snack, the microwave won't normally be available unless you've got some very expensive inverter system on board. Different types of campervan and motorhome. Well, starting with the smallest, the pop-top campers, the VW style, other base vehicles of similar ilk. These are the ones that are most likely to replace a car. They're the smallest, and they're the most like camping. A lot of people go to these sort of vehicles when they're moving up from a tent, say. And like a tent, you have got canvas around the top, so they're the least practical for real winter camping. You'd usually have some diesel heating, so you can keep warm most of the year, but they're not really designed for real winter use. But they are practical as everyday cars because typically they're around the same size as, say, as a large estate car. Not many of them will have much in the way of toilet facilities. Certainly you won't expect a shower on board. It's usually just a sort of loo in a cupboard as an emergency facility. Next size up, the larger panel vans. Yes, the larger panel vans, you've now got full standing room without having to raise the roof. Because of that, of course, you've got no canvas, so you've got better winterisation, better insulation of the vehicle, usually double glazed windows, and usually onboard shower and toilet facilities. So they're more designed for all season use. They're also a little bit bigger, of course. Now we've gone from sort of 5 metres long to 5.5 up to 6.5 metres typically, and a little bit wider as well. But they are still more practical for sort of daily use, maybe as an occasional second car, than a coach-built motorhome, because they are that bit narrower and visibility out of them tends to be that bit better. The next type is a relatively new thing on the market, but seems to be growing all the time in popularity, and that's these high-top campers that have then had a pop-top added on top. Now here the pop-top is purely there to give you extra sleeping capacity. So you have a double bed up there, but you don't need to raise that roof to give you standing room. You've already got full standing room. As I say, it's just there to give you extra berths, because a lot of those larger panel van conversions without the pop-top are just 2-berth vehicles. They may have more travel seats, but they usually only sleep 2. With just a few sort of rare exceptions. Moving into coach-built motorhomes, the most popular type is the low profile, known as such because of their sort of relatively low pod over the cab, which these days usually has a sunroof in it to give you more light into the front of the vehicle. Makes the front of the van feel a lot more spacious. Lots of different layouts, which we'll come on to in a minute. Fixed bed layouts, non-fixed bed layouts, layouts with drop-down beds. So plenty of choice in terms of the style of vehicle and the size too. Now, thinking about the size of coach-built motorhomes, typically the width is quite a bit greater than with the panel van conversions, around 2.3 to 2.35 metres. However, increasingly in the market, manufacturers are finding demand for coach-built motorhomes that are a bit narrower, somewhere between 2.1 and 2.2 metres. Might not sound like a big difference, but it can feel like a huge difference when you're trying to thread it down a narrow country lane, say in Cornwall or somewhere. And you've still got the flat sides, the full winterisation of a coach-built motorhome. They'll always feel a little bit roomier than a panel van, because panel vans get narrower towards the roof, they're just the shape of the vehicle, whereas with the flat sides of a coach-built motorhome, so a narrow-bodied coach-built motorhome will always feel that bit bigger inside than a panel van. The traditional type of coach-built motorhome was the overcab, where you've got this big, rather ungainly lump over the cab with a double bed in it. Less popular these days, but they do still work for families. They're popular on hire fleets for that reason, and they tend to appear in the sort of more affordable motorhome ranges. Key thing to consider, well, two things. If you're sleeping up here, obviously with a shape like this, if you're sleeping at the front of the Luton, headroom can be quite limited. Access to the bed up here is also by a ladder, but the advantage of this over a low-profile motorhome with a drop-down bed is that then the drop-down bed comes down over your lounge. So once the bed is down, you've lost your seating area. With this sort of bed, it's there all the time, and whether you're using the lounge or not, it doesn't really matter. Then there's A-class motorhomes. Now, A-class motorhomes are generally expensive. There are a few around the 80 grand mark, but new, they're generally sort of 100 grand and more. What are you paying the extra for? And I'm talking about an extra cost over a comparable low-profile motorhome of around about 12 grand typically. You'll sometimes find in European motorhome ranges that they offer pretty much exactly the same vehicle in low-profile and in A-class form, but you'll pay about 12 grand more for the A-class version. Why would you do that? Well, you've got flat sides all the way through, fully insulated right down to the cab. You've got this big windscreen for a lovely view out, whether you're driving through the Alps or whether you're parked on a campsite with a nice view of a lake or something. You've also got a drop-down bed usually in the cab, so that when you pull that bed down, it's just coming down over the front seats, the two cab seats, so you've still got the rest of the lounge area available, unlike in a low profile where the drop-down bed will be further back in the vehicle. Plenty of choice of these, but they tend to be larger vehicles, and as I say, they tend to be from the premium brands and in premium ranges. Base vehicles. Pretty much every motorhome and campervan starts life as a light commercial vehicle. And there's a selection of different vans on the market that get converted by the main manufacturers. But I've never known a year like this one where there is so much change going on in the base vehicle market. For a start, the Volkswagen, which has been such a dominant force in this sector for so long, is changing. There's a new Volkswagen coming next year, a new T7, which is basically a Ford Transit Custom with a Volkswagen-style front on it, Volkswagen-style interior, but it's basically the same van underneath, the same engines and so on. So the current T6.1 is on the way out. You can't order a brand new one from Volkswagen anymore, but the converters do still have stocks of vehicles to convert. Volkswagen, though, aren't using this Ford-derived van for their own conversion. They're using the multivan, which is a slightly smaller people carrier. It's a longer vehicle, but it's actually got less space inside, so slightly compromised, but that's what the new California Volkswagen's own camper will be based on. Alternatives to the Volkswagen, well, the Renault's been around quite a while. It's a nice little van to drive, and it tends to be a bit cheaper than the Volkswagen. The other main alternative is the Ford Transit Custom. Now, this is the one that's sort of on run out at the moment. You'll still see those as brand new unregistered vehicles, but there is an all-new Ford that is just appearing on the market now, and that's the vehicle that is a joint project with Volkswagen. The larger vans, well, the Seville van, as it's generally known, has dominated the market for a long time. Seville is just the name of the factory where it's made, and you'll see the Fiat Ducato, Peugeot Boxer, and the Citroën Relay or Jumper. They're all basically the same thing, generally built in Italy, but there are differences. Now, this is the current Fiat. As from, well, about now, really, it looks like this. So it's got a new style front on it. Peugeot's also got a new style front on it, but the big change is that for 2025, whether you buy a Peugeot, a Fiat or a Citroën, they will all have the same engines, they'll all have the same chassis options, and they'll all be available with an 8-speed automatic gearbox. Up until now, if you bought a Peugeot or a Citroën, you couldn't get an automatic. Alternatives to the Fiats and Peugeots, well, post-COVID, the industry couldn't get nearly enough Fiat vans. The taps seemed to be turned off by Stellantis, and the industry turned in big numbers to the Ford Transit as an alternative chassis. I prefer the Ford to drive to the Fiats and Peugeots, primarily because the driving position allows you to sit a bit lower. There's a lot more adjustment on the steering column, and the ride is a little bit softer. So it does feel quite a bit different. If you're not sure, if you're considering two different models, do take a test drive and see what you think. The Mercedes Sprinter has also become increasingly popular, but generally in much more expensive motorhomes. You'll see it in the sort of premium ranges and so on, both as panel vans and coach builds. Four-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive, as well as front-wheel drive, available in the Mercedes Sprinter. And then my favourite of the larger vans is the Volkswagen Crafter, which is also seen as a MAN TGE. Same van, different badges. Drives really, really nicely, and it feels just like a big Volkswagen Transporter. But if you're looking at those, there's plenty of choice in the panel van market, but not many coach builds. I think Knaus are about the only one, really, in any volume. People often ask me at these things about electric vans, and really it's a bit of a non-starter at the moment. There's nothing viable for larger motorhomes or even larger camper vans. This little Nissan van is the only van I've seen converted in any numbers at all, and Nissan have stopped making that now. The ID Buzz from Volkswagen looks very retro and potentially could have made quite a funky little camper, but really it's too small, too expensive, and the range is too limited. So, layouts. And if you go on a dealer forecourt and you see a van that's maybe a couple of months old and has delivery mileage or not much more, the chances are that somebody bought a van with the wrong layout. It's the easiest thing to get wrong, and I would say if you're not sure, hire a van first. It's a risk of a few £100 against a risk of many thousands of getting it wrong. So the different layouts. In the smaller vans, typically the Volkswagens and so on, the most popular by far is the side kitchen layout. Your rear bench seat, either a two-seater or a three-seater, will fold down to make your bed. And the key thing with this type of layout is the storage actually behind that seat. If you've got a good amount of space behind there for your bedding, for all your outdoor stuff in the lower level, then it will be a practical camper. If that seat hasn't got enough storage behind it, it won't be very practical to use. You just won't have enough storage space. Also, if you're looking at this type of van, do look very carefully at the pedigree of the converter, because there's an awful lot of relatively new and inexperienced firms have sprung up in this area, and quality does vary enormously. In the smaller vans, the other alternative is this sort of arrangement where you've got 4 individual seats at the front using the swivel cab seats. And the main thing with this is that you get 2 single beds rather than a double. Kitchen area and often some form of toilet area at the back, but not a proper walk-in toilet compartment. So then moving into the bigger panel vans, and very popular with UK manufacturers, is to have a rear lounge. Lovely on a nice day when you can swing the back doors open, enjoy the comfort of your sofas inside the van. If the lounge is long enough, you'll sleep lengthways, which is the better option, either in singles or pulling the settees together to make a double. And some of these also have a second seating area at the front to give you travel seats. But if that makes into a bed, it'll only be a child bed. It won't be a proper bed. If you're looking at one of these where you sleep across the vehicle, look very carefully at bed sizes, because obviously you're limited not just by the width of the vehicle, but how they've actually trimmed out the side of the van. Some manufacturers trim very carefully into the shape of the vehicle, others just panel it out, and you can easily lose a couple of inches of bed length on either end of the bed. But in any case, whatever van you're looking at, do look very carefully at bed sizes, and don't take manufacturers' figures as gospel. They seem to have their own tape measures. I've measured many a motorhome bed that claims to be, 6'3" or something, and I can't make it more than 5'11". They're a little bit economical with the truth on that sometimes. I'd also add at that point that perhaps the key things to get right, if you take away nothing else from today, the two things that I think are by far and away the most important, you must enjoy driving your vehicle, because if you don't, if you're always worried that it's too big and you're not going to be able to park it and can you get it through that gap, then it's just going to spoil the whole touring experience. And the other thing is sleeping. If you don't sleep comfortably, if the bed's not big enough or it's not comfortable because it's got lumps and joins in it, that's you might tolerate that for one night away on a weekend, but you're not going to have much fun if you're away for a few days and you're not sleeping properly. So get those two things right and you're well on the way to enjoying your motorhoming. So back to panel van conversion layouts, and this is the continental approach, to have a double bed or twin singles at the back. Usually a double bed across the van if you're looking at the 6 metre vans, and lengthways sleeping if you're looking at the longer 6.4 metre vans. Not only have you got the comfort of a proper bed, but you've also got a lot of storage under the bed. So think about that when you're looking at these sort of vans. But of course, when you squeeze a permanent bedroom into a panel van, obviously the lounge area is going to be compromised. Always, with any camper van or motorhome, however big or small, it's a small space that you're living in and you're making compromises. You can't have a big lounge, big kitchen, a big washroom and a big bedroom, or you'd end up with something that's based on London bus or something. Another alternative in panel vans is to have a front lounge, and again you've got the sliding door here so you can enjoy nice views out on a good day. This one's a Mervy, and they do this sort of arrangement probably better than most. In coach builds, well, the big thing to decide is whether you want a fixed bed or not. Those owners that have vehicles without a fixed bed will tell me until they're blue in the face that having a fixed bed is a complete waste of space because you're only sleeping in it and you're not using it most of the time. Those that buy fixed bed layouts will tell me that you're never going to sleep comfortably on beds made out of sofas. Well, only you can decide which is the right one for you. I tend to fall into the fixed bed camp, although I have used some non-fixed bed layouts that I've enjoyed. But the other thing to consider is not just about the bed, it's about the storage. If you have a layout that doesn't have a fixed bed, look very, very carefully at where you're going to store things like outdoor chairs, barbecues, anything that's big and bulky, because it's obvious when you've got a fixed bed, you've got a big storage area underneath it. If you haven't got a fixed bed, you might struggle with that sort of stuff. And don't be tempted to keep anything heavy high up. It needs to be kept low down. So types of fixed bed layout. The French bed is a bit of a classic. It's been around a long time. Compromised by the fact that the bed and the washroom share the width of the van. So one or the other might be a little bit compromised. The other thing to remember is that if you're sleeping here and you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and need the loo, you've got to climb over this person here to get to the loo. Person B might not be very happy that you're climbing over them and waking them up in the night. This sort of transverse bed at the back of the vehicle also has the same issue of access, one person climbing over the other to get out of the bed. But like the French bed layout, these tend to figure in slightly shorter motorhomes. So if you don't want a great big van, but you do want a fixed bed, then these sort of layouts are quite popular. The other thing to consider, if you're very, very tall, these layouts tend to offer the longest beds in the market. Because you're sleeping across the van, potentially you've got 2.3 metres on the outside, so a little bit less on the inside, but you can often find beds that are 7 foot long because they're going right the way across the vehicle. So if you want a non-compromised double bed layout in a motorhome, the island bed is the thing, usually with wardrobes on either side and access around the foot of the bed. But think about the bed size, whether the foot of the bed is curved, so you're going to lose length in these corners. You might have a foot dangling over the end if you're tall. Some of them slide back like this one and give you a sort of chaise longue arrangement, which looks great in the motorhome dealer's showroom, and is very comfortable in the morning when you want to perhaps read the paper. But when you pull the bed out for sleeping, look very carefully at the the space around the foot of the bed. With any of these layouts, you normally very often have the shower and toilet at the foot of the bed, and often when you've added a duvet on as well, you haven't got that much room around the foot of the bed. Some are much better than others for access. The alternative to that is to have single beds, of course, and these are usually mounted high over a garage. Not always. There are a few lower beds if that's what you're looking for, but they're generally high over a garage with a couple of steps up. Because you're now sleeping between a wall at each end, the length of the beds becomes really crucial, because you can't hang your toes over the end or stretch out at all. If it's 6 foot between there and there, that really is, you're probably not going to be comfortable if you're much more than about 5'9". So look very carefully about bed sizes on these. Also, for reasons that are beyond my understanding, a lot of manufacturers put cupboards over the heads of the beds, and then you can't sit up comfortably in the morning. Now, there are manufacturers that have seen the light and don't do that anymore, and there are those that have a sort of ratchet system under the head of the bed, so you can tip up the head of the bed and then sit up comfortably. If you walk into a van and you see cupboards and you think, oh no, not again, just have a look and see if they've got that ratchet system, but tends to be in the more expensive models very often. I don't think we've got any kids in today, but if any of you are thinking of camping, motorhoming with children, then bunk bed layouts work really, really well. And often the bottom bunk can be folded up to turn that area into a small garage. If you're looking at non-fixed bed layouts, the traditional one is the rear lounge. And these often appeal to people that have come from caravans, because it's the most like being in a caravan just with a Fiat or Ford or whatever cab on the front, which is sort of distant from your main living area. Obviously, these are primarily two-berth vehicles, because you won't normally have travel seats at the back here. But if that's an issue for you, then there are twin lounge layouts. You've still got your comfortable U-shaped lounge with windows on all three sides for nice views out, but you've now got a second seating area at the front. So that gives you versatility on site. If you're camping perhaps with more than 2 people, then some can sit at the front, some at the back, people doing different things. If you want maybe one end, the TV is on the other end, people are reading or whatever. But with these layouts, especially if you're looking at camping with more than 2 people, look very carefully at storage, because some of these are 6-berth vans and they don't really have storage for 6 people. There are also always manufacturers coming up with different things, so if you can't find exactly what you're looking for, do keep looking at what we're reviewing on YouTube and in the magazines. And this one is a bit of a novelty. It's a Rapido with a rear lounge, but there's no back window because that's where the garage is. Another novelty, there's manufacturers like Pilot doing a rear lounge with a drop-down bed, so you don't have to make the seats into a bed at night. You've got the drop-down bed, but at the back rather than at the front of the vehicle. And in the very large A-class motorhomes, there's a couple of companies doing what's called a C-shaped lounge, where you've actually got seating facing in all 4 directions. Gives you the best lounge I've ever seen in a motorhome, but these are big and expensive vans. Other non-fixed bed layouts, well, this is a bit of a British classic. You've got a couple of settees at the front, and then at the back, the kitchen across the back wall, the door in this corner, and then the washroom opposite. These are small motorhomes, generally around about 6 metres, and they often appeal to people buying their first van because they're quite compact and often relatively affordable too. Sometimes these settees will make single beds, but usually if that's the case, you'll have your feet on the swivel driver's seat. So just look and see if that seems to be comfortable. The other alternative is to sleep across the vehicle, making a transverse double bed, but then of course you've got more of an access issue. Having your cake and eating it, well, the drop-down bed might seem like that because you can have layouts like this 7-metre one where you've got a big front lounge, drop-down bed, so you've got a proper bed, you're not making it out of seats, decent kitchen area in the sort of in the middle of the van, and then a washroom at the back and a garage beyond that. So you've got a garage without having a fixed bed. These layouts are about 7 metres long typically, and there's quite a lot of them on the market now. It's a good choice. If you're looking at any drop-down bed layout, do look at how far down the bed comes, because some of them will have cupboards mounted underneath, which will restrict how far the bed can come down. Some of them block the door when the bed's down. Most of them are electric now. If you're looking at second-hand vans, you may come across manual drop-down beds, but there aren't many of those left on the new market now. And look to, I mean, you'll normally have to lower the table before you drop the bed down, but look to at what else you're going to have to do. I looked at one van recently where it had a very good bed once it was down, but to bring the bed down, I had to move about, 7 cushions, backrest cushions and so on, and pile them up in the cab. On this particular van, which I think is a Chausson, you can see that the backrest cushions are still in place. So all you have to do is lower the table, lower the bed, job done. If you're going to end up with a pile of cushions, it's not quite the same. You'll also find layouts that have a sort of chameleon effect. They change from this sort of arrangement where you've got settees to this sort of arrangement where you've got forward-facing travel seats. Now, that's increasingly common on the market because people like the open plan nature of this sort of side settee arrangement. But typically, in the past, these side settee layouts didn't offer any rear travel seats. By offering a conversion from one to the other, you add versatility to the vehicle. But if you're looking at these, look at how easy it is to convert from one to the other, because some are much easier than others. Some require extra cushions and extra bits of framework for head restraints to be carried. Think about where that's going to go. And generally, I would say that these layouts work if you're going to carry rear passengers from time to time, but not if you're going to carry rear passengers most of the time. Winter camping. It's another thing to consider. Are you going to put your van away when it gets really, really cold, or are you going to head off to Switzerland and do a bit of skiing perhaps? Well, if you are serious about winter camping, it is quite possible, even in panel vans. And I used 2 hobby vans a few years ago, this one and a panel van conversion in, well, it was at least minus 20 in northern Norway. Nothing froze. We were very comfortable inside the van. We did use an awful lot of gas, though, so we would have been better off if we'd had diesel heating or electric heating on site. Probably diesel heating would have been best. Think, too, about where your water tanks are if you're going to use your van all year round. You'll see vans that have heated and insulated underslung tanks. They will never be as good as inboard tanks. I had an experience in Derbyshire where I took a panel van away, had heated and insulated underslung tanks, and the manufacturer assured me it would be absolutely fine in any winter conditions I was going to experience. It was -6 at night. I got up in the morning and everything had frozen. So I couldn't flush the loo, I couldn't use the shower, and most importantly of all, I couldn't have a cup of coffee because nothing would come out of the tap. Not a good start to the road test. Think too about your storage. It's not only important to have enough space for everything you want to carry, but also, crucially, the payload. If you have a 3.5 ton van and you overload it to more than that, you're travelling illegally. You could get stopped. If you're lucky, you could maybe unload some water and get back to a legal weight. But if you have an accident in an overloaded vehicle, then your insurance company might say, bye-bye, you're not covered. So this van, fortunately, did have a good payload because my wife loaded it up for a trip to Denmark. And you can see the advantage of having a big garage area. If you're buying a 3.5 ton van and you think, well, the payload's a bit marginal, because a lot of the big sort of 7.5 metre vans that are on 3.5 ton chassis, well, the payloads really aren't very clever, especially if you've got a garage to use. So a number of them will offer upgrades to the chassis, or you can go to companies like SV Tech and have the vehicle upplated. But if you're going to do that, think too about the downsides of doing so, because if you go over 3.5 tonnes, then abroad your speed limits will come down, you'll pay higher tolls on the motorways and so on. So there are downsides too about going to a heavier vehicle. Finally, I'd just say don't rush in. You know, there are some great deals around at the moment, people offering thousands off new vehicles because they've got too many in stock, but it's very important to buy the right vehicle, not be tempted in by that offer that you can only buy today. So Campervan magazine does what it says on the tin. MMM has been around since 1966, not only providing advice on what to buy, but accessories, campsites, travel information, all the rest of it. So please read the magazines. Buying Your Perfect Motorhome is an annual that we've got here.
Available for free on that table over there.
And yeah, time to answer any questions.
In your own van, Peter, have you experienced what's your sleeping like? Is it quite comfortable? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the first VW we bought was a California. In that, we found the bed extremely hard, so we bought a Duvet mattress topper, and that solved that issue. Obviously, in a small van, space is even more of a premium. And in a Volkswagen, you've always got the compromise between the width of the kitchen and the width of the bed. We've now gone for a van with a narrower kitchen, so less storage. We've got quite a tiny sink, but the rest of it's pretty much comparable. We've still got 2-burner hob, decent sized fridge, but we've got a much wider bed, and we think for us that is a much better compromise.
Any other drawbacks that you see that you come across on that?
What, of going to a...
With the use of it at all, apart from what you just said?
No, I look around at new vans all the time, and I've not seen anything I'd change ours for, but it suits us. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What van have you got?
It's a CMC Hembill Urban on a VW T6.
Anyone else got any questions?
So the important factor again is to check out as many vans as you
Yeah, look at as many vans as you can. Don't rush in. Watch the YouTube reviews, read the magazine road tests. There's, if you go on our website, Out and About Live, there's road tests of vans going back years and years and years. Yeah, do take a test drive before you buy. And if you're not certain, you know, if you're thinking, oh, do I go for that size of van or maybe something a bit bigger, go and hire one. Go and try it out. You'll soon, you know, a long weekend away in a hired van will give you a very good idea of whether that sort of van, that sort of layout is right for you.
Well, the information you've given this morning to us is fantastic, because there's some things there that I never thought, like the width and the
Yeah.
Hello, I've got a 3.5 ton camper van.
Yeah.
But how do I know what the payload is?
Well, is it a mass-produced vehicle or regular production vehicle?
Oh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
Eldest 185.
Right, well, you should be able to get the standard payload off the manufacturer's website or off their brochure. But do consider that any options that were added or any accessories that have been added since it was built all eat into the payload. So if you're ordering a new van, you might look at the brochure and say, well, the payload's 500 kilos. But if you then add an automatic gearbox, that's probably, I don't know, 30 kilos off the payload. If you add an awning, that's taking your payload down. If you add a TV, you know, everything you add, and then that payload has to be enough for each person, because the payload will only include the driver, so every passenger that you're putting in the vehicle is eroding your payload, and every single thing that you take into the vehicle is coming out of that payload.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Think too about another thing with payload calculations is that most manufacturers include either zero or very little water in your fresh water tank. Now, that's just not realistic. Most of us travel with at least half a tank of water, and that's 50 litres of water is 50 kilos off your payload. Fuel, it's normally 90% full diesel tank, normally 1 gas cylinder, a mains lead, and a driver who is 75 kilos. Now, not all of us will fit into 75 kilos. So again, you know, if you're, you know, you might be 85 kilos, well, that's another 10 kilos off your payload.
Do you have any tips on buying a second-hand motorhome?
Yes. The key thing, particularly if you're looking at coach-built motorhomes, look to see, and again, if it's older particularly, look for any issues of damp. And that is the killer on second-hand on older coach-built motorhomes. Look around where the side panels meet the roof and the rear. Look around the windows, look around the roof vents, and particularly where any accessories may have been added, any bike racks and awnings, because you don't know whether those were added professionally or whether they've been added by a DIYer later on, and they may not have been properly sealed when that's been done. Thinking of the payload issue, if accessories have been added by a previous owner, you know, you may not be sure of the payload of that exact vehicle. So get the dealer to give you a weighbridge certificate to show exactly what the vehicle weighs. Stick to well-known brands if you can. I wouldn't buy anything perhaps where, you know, it's a brand that's no longer imported from the continent or where the manufacturer has gone bust, because you may struggle with spares supply.
Anyone else got any more questions?
Thanks. Peter, firstly, just to say we've watched a lot of your videos, and thank you very much. They're really, really good. When you talk about hiring, I mean, that obviously makes a lot of sense just to try it out. And we specifically wanted to try a drop-down bed.
Yeah.
Is it quite easy? You just Google it?
Yeah, I mean, I would look in your local area, see what hire companies there are around. Just look on the Google reviews, make sure they've got decent ratings from people that have used them, and just look for something that's the closest to what you're actually thinking of buying. You might not find the exact make and model that you want to buy, but if you can find something that's broadly similar, then that will give you a very, very good idea if you're on the right track.
Cool. Thanks very much.
And Matt, who's here, who does the Motorhome Matt podcast and's got that leisure shop, he's got a hire company, the Motorhome Holiday Hire Company. So if you pop to his stand, he can give you some advice as well. Anybody else? Well, I've got a question for you, Peter. If you've got a big dog, I can't remember, you don't have a dog, do you? I
have a dog, but he's not big.
Oh. What sort of size would you say is kind of the minimum size for if you've got a big dog? Because I like the smaller campervans, but he's a big dog.
I think it's all about floor space, because you've got to have somewhere for the dog to go, particularly at night. And this is where different models can be so different. With the Volkswagen, it's a small van, but the way our seat system works, the dog could sleep under the end of the bed, whereas in others, the whole seat slides forward, so you've lost that sort of space under the end of the bed. So it's about looking at specific vehicles. If you're looking at others where there may be room for the dog to sleep in the cab at night, that would make a difference. And you've got to think about where the dog's going to travel too, whether and if it's going to travel in a cage or whether it's going to travel with like a seatbelt system. So, yeah.
I guess that's where hiring would come in good as
well. Yeah. And a lot of hire companies will have dog-friendly vehicles as well.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Well, thank you, Peter. And, if you want to grab buying your Perth motorhome, they're over there on the table. And
that magazine expands really on everything that I've said today in more detail. And if anybody does think of anything, I'll just hang around for a while outside if anybody's got any further questions.
And if you missed any of it, I will be emailing you a video version of this next week in your post-show email. Right. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.